One of the most beautiful concepts in Scripture is God placing the fruit of His Spirit in us. It's a beautiful, beautiful thought. Somehow us being aware of God allows these beautiful attributes to flow from within us. It's this idea that when we operate in a spiritually connected mode, our lives manifest higher level spiritual results. It's not just us. It is this beautiful fruit of God that flows through us. When we go into a grocery store to buy fruit, where do we find it? Produce department, that's right. Plants that don't produce fruit might be pretty, like roses are certainly pretty, or they might be useful, like an oak tree provides wood for building things. But plants that produce fruit or trees that produce fruit, that's special because a plant or tree that produces fruit sustains and fuels life other than its own. It provides life and then life for others. Beautiful thing. At a basic level, human beings have a focus on basic needs. All of us, until these needs are met, all of us have much difficulty moving to the next level. Things like food, water, sleep, shelter, safety, and sex. Those are the basic needs that we have. And for extra credit, I don't know if you know this or not, those things are regulated by what part of our brain? Does anybody know? Hypothalamus. Would you say that with me? Hypothalamus. That's where those come, and all of us have to have those needs met before we can go to deeper levels of things. If you're starving, that's why when somebody's starving and a Christian says, hey brother, do you want to get saved? They're starving. They feed them. Feed them. Don't worry about that. Feed them because they're hungry, and those needs have to be met. Producing spiritual fruits like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, reliability, and gentleness barely matter if those basic needs are out of reach, if they're not being fulfilled. But when we're able to move beyond the natural basics of life, we can start to pursue higher spiritual paths. And when I get that right, it's not just good for me. I begin to produce fruit that transcends just my survival and actually makes a difference in the world. That's what I want all of us to understand. When we produce fruit, not only is it good for us, but it's good for everybody we encounter. Just as a plant or a tree that produces fruit is special because it sustains and fuels life other than its own, a person who produces spiritual fruit allows fruit to flow from within. That person sustains and fuels life beyond themselves. Spiritual fruits like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, reliability, and gentleness are good for me, but even more exciting, they're good for everyone else. Now, there is a fruit that I have not mentioned yet. Anybody picked up on the fact that I have not mentioned one? Some of you know this. Fruit of the Spirit in Galatians that I haven't mentioned yet, and I haven't mentioned it because I think it stands out just a little bit from all of the rest. So let's look at the list on the screen. This is Galatians 5:22 and 23. This is where we get the fruit of the Spirit. And this is what Paul writes. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, that's reliability, gentleness, and this is the one I haven't mentioned yet, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Self-control. That's a fruit that's a little more self-focused than others focused. It's a fruit that if I nurture it and I let it grow, it will have a transformational impact on how good I will be at helping others. In other words, it sounds like it's all about me, self-control. But if I get this, it's not only going to help me, it's going to help me help other people. It is like this amazing fruit that if I get it right, it's going to make my whole life better, and people are going to be touched in a way because of that you don't see in any of the other fruits. When we're on a plane, what do flight attendants tell us to do in the event of a change in cabin pressure that results in oxygen mass being released? You know? Put it on yourself first. Don't put it on the baby. Don't put it on grandma. You put it on yourself first. Secure your own mask first, because we help children or elderly people with their mask before we help them. Because if we don't take care of ourselves first, we're going to lose the ability to help the people around us. Now, if I pass out trying to help you, my intentions may have been beautiful, but you and I both are going to die. That's not a good position to be in. I can't help you nearly as well as I'd like to if I don't first take care of myself. Self-control is one of those kind of ideas of taking care of ourselves, but when we do, because it's a fruit, it's going to bless others. I might really want to help sick people, but I'll never help sick people as well as somebody who refrains from helping sick people long enough to go to school, study through college, study through medical school in order to help people at the highest levels. I may jump right in. I'm not going to be nearly as effective. Now, last week we started talking about an old problem common to all of us, but we gave it a new name. You're familiar with the name adulting. And it was interesting to hear just the little conversations about adulting this week as I was with several people from the village. Adulting is what we're doing when we move beyond expecting or needing somebody else to help us get our needs met. When I'm adulting well, it's when I'm taking responsibility for my life, when I'm being intentional in my desire to first survive, but later to thrive. This week I want to introduce a tool that I've been using to help me adult better. Now this is something that I have been thinking about every single day for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I have found it very, very helpful, and I hope you will too. Thank you, baby. Thank you very much. I alluded to this last week when we talked about rules that I set for myself. These are rules that help me reach my personal goals. Now I've stopped using the word goals as much. It's a solid word, but I think there's a better word, and I'm using it these days every time I think goals, and that's the word endpoint. I have many endpoints in my life. They're goals, but I'm using the word endpoint because to me it just seems a little stronger. One of Webster's definitions for tool is something that helps to gain an end. A tool is something that helps us gain an end. The tool I've been using to reach the end point is something called self-control. But I don't like the word self-control. That sounds like a negative word to me. It sounds like a chore to me, self-control. It seems so negative. So I'm kind of trying to rebrand it a little bit. Self-control is really, really good, but I think it needs to be rebranded just a little bit. If you're familiar with what rebranding means, that's used in marketing to kind of give people a little different idea. In the psychological world, we use the word reframing. They both mean basically the same thing. Let's take a look at this just a little differently, put a little different name on it, and see if it won't be helpful to us. The way I've rebranded self-control, which is what's going to take me to the end point of these goals that I have in my life, the way I've rebranded self-control is I'm thinking about developing in me an inner boss. Developing in me an inner boss. Have you ever noticed you have passive thoughts that go through your mind all the time, or you can have active things that you make yourself think about? That's where this inner boss comes. It's not a passive conscious voice. It's not this conscience that just is floating in the background that says, don't eat that piece of pie. It's not that voice. It's a voice that says, you know what your goals are. You know what your end point is. This is what you need to do. It's that inner boss voice. And I want you to stay with me, because if you get this, it's going to be very, very good for all of you. Your inner boss is intentionally focusing your thoughts towards decisions that will help you execute a specific goal. Let me say that again because I want you to get it. Your inner boss, that self-control, is intentionally focusing your thoughts towards decisions that will help you execute a specific goal or reach an endpoint. Now, I have spoken, I counted this up, I've spoken on self-control dozens of times over 36 years as a pastor. Can you imagine how many messages I've preached on self-control over 36 years? And most of them are basically the same thing. This is what it was. God wants you to practice self-control. That means don't drink too much. That's always point number one. That means don't eat too much. That was always point number two. That means don't be sexually active outside of marriage. That's point number three. And don't be undisciplined in your speech. That was basically it. Now, I'm not saying any of the previous lessons were bad. I just think it gave people kind of a passive idea of what it really means. It's passive. Okay, yeah, God doesn't want that, so I get that. It's almost like, okay, we heard the self-control thing. Now let's go eat lunch. We got it. We got it. But I'm seeing it differently now, and I think this will help you get more engaged in what really matters in actually seeing your life change. Because that's what we want, isn't it? We want people that are here to be living higher level lives than people who aren't here. We want them to be learning things and putting them into practice and becoming all that God creates us to be. Now, there are a few important reasons why I think we need this inner boss. First one is this: without an inner boss, I tend to live life passively. And I bet you do too. I tend to live life passively. I accept what comes my way rather than pursuing what I really need or want. We go along to get along because it's easier to not make waves. I follow rules set by others rather than being brave enough to set my own. It's a very safe choice. I've done it much of my life. To not have an activity or to not have an actively working inner boss, very easy, very safe. It's the very reason why the concept of an inner boss is relevant to the topic of adulting. You have to decide you're not just going to go along. You've got to decide you are going to live at a different level. Now, let me ask you a question. When we're kids, we don't need inner bosses. Why? Because we have outer bosses. Who are the outer bosses? They're our parents. They tell us what to do. They tell us when to get up, tell us when to go to sleep, tell us what to eat, tell us to get off the furniture. They tell us all these things. That's what they do all the time. They are the outer bosses. It's only when we decide it's time to grow up and take responsibility for who we are and what we're going to be in life that we truly begin to adult. I had a friend who lived with me in the late 80s. Ethan will remember this. Ethan was just a little boy. This friend, great friend of mine, I loved him, but he struggled his whole life and still struggles with this whole adulting idea. He is living with us, had a job, and I was making the boys sandwiches one day, and we ran out of bread. And my friend said, I'll go get the bread. So he went to the store and bumped into some friends that were going to Florida. He got in the car with them and went to Florida. He didn't think about calling his job. He didn't think about calling his mom. He didn't call me and the boys. We're standing there with peanut butter on a knife, and he's gone. We did not see him for 2 weeks. That's that passive voice that says, oh, let's go here. Oh, let's go here. Oh, let's go here. That's what he did, and it has been a difficulty for him his whole life. You need an inner boss, or you too can have a life of passivity that's not going to take you where you want it to take you. Second reason is this: my inner boss knows my goals and dreams and helps me make hard choices and good decisions that match my personal values. If I have an inner boss, and this is an active thing, not passive, active, it knows where my endpoints are. It knows where my goals are. It knows what I want. It knows where I want to head, and it's going to give me information that I need to accomplish to move in the direction that I need to move. I can give you a great example of how I empowered my inner boss this week. This is a true story, fresh off the presses. For all of my adult life, as a father and as a son and as a pastor, I have been accessible 24 hours a day, every day. It's just the way I've always lived. I put my phone right beside the bed, and if somebody thinks of something they want to tell me at 1 a.m, they ring the phone and I answer. Now, my logic is I don't want to miss if something happens, if somebody's in a crisis. But can I tell you something? Most years, nobody calls me because of a crisis. They call me because they thought of something and they thought they'd leave it on a voicemail, and they didn't know that it rings right beside my bed and I answer the crazy phone. Or people will text me and they're not thinking I'm going to respond back, but my phone is right there. Ding, it dings. I'm thinking, what's going on? I look at the phone and it's a joke or something, and it's like, oh my gosh, because then adrenaline has shot through my body. I was sound asleep, now I'm not asleep, and now I've got this problem of laying in the bed saying, this is crazy, I can't go back to sleep. That has been my life, my entire life, but I couldn't do it differently because I thought I would be failing somebody. I would be disappointing somebody. What if that was that one chance when somebody needed to reach me at 3:30 in the morning and I was not reachable? So I've gone to bed with my electronic devices turned on, and I thought it was important for me to be available in case of death or emergency or just if a friend needed me. And that's kind of the way that I lived. Over the last months, though, I've been doing a lot of reading about things like sleep. And I've discovered that's one of the areas I have cheated myself, because I go to bed about midnight. Then when the phone dings, I wake up and I'm awake all through the night. I'm awake. And then I get up really, really early, and I'm realizing that that's an area that I need to do better. So another thing that I'm learning about sleep is researchers are saying that you need 8 hours of sleep every day. Now, you might get 6 hours and then a nap later, but you need 8 hours of sleep, and there's no getting around it. You will cheat yourself, and you will have all kind of potential for sickness and real difficulties if you're not getting 8 hours of sleep. If I want to live a long, big, happy, healthy life, I have to respect how important sleep is to me. I have to take it seriously. So, I was talking to a friend about my reluctance to make myself harder to reach during the hours I need to be sleeping. I had legitimate business reasons for this. You've heard all of that. I had legitimate spiritual reasons. You've heard all of that. I hate saying no to people. I don't like to ever disappoint people, so that was a problem. But I realized during my conversation that this was exactly the type of situation that I needed to call on the inner boss. I needed to say, inner boss, help me make this decision. And you know what? Empowering the inner boss to make an executive decision to do what is best for my mental and physical health went something like this inside of my mind. I thought these things. I have the power to make decisions about what is best for me. Making sleep an acceptable priority is a healthy choice that I have a right and a responsibility to make. If somebody can't accept the fact that they need to leave a message while I'm sleeping, and I'll call them back the first thing when I wake up, then they don't really care that I wouldn't be giving them the best care. They should know this is important, and anybody who loves me will understand. Then I got on the phone and I called all of my kids, and I said, hey y'all, if you try to call me tonight, I'm turning my phone off at 10 o'clock, and it's gonna come back on, I think 6:15 in the morning, but 10 o'clock till 6:15 in the morning, I'm gonna be off the grid. You know what they all said? That's great. It's about time you did that. And I thought they were going to maybe say, Dad, what if we need to get, they didn't care. Jenna said, okay, just know I'm going to come over. I got a key to your house. I'm going to come over, and if I need you, I'm just going to come into the house, climb up, just be staring at you at the bed till you wake up. And I've had that little nightmare in my mind. So other than that being freaking me out just a little bit, that she's going to be there staring at me. But my passive approach to getting the sleep I need just wasn't working. So I needed an inner boss that said, you know what, make that decision. You know that's important. You can do it. And you may say that's not a big deal to you. It was a big deal to me, sleeping 4 hours a night. There's a reason I look like this. I haven't slept enough. I'm not supposed to be looking like this. And now I'm doing it differently, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Here's another thing. The concept of an inner boss is both spiritually and scientifically valid. This is important. We know it's spiritually valid because the concept of an inner boss is just reframing what I talked to you about at the start, self-control. It's a fruit of the Spirit. It's something that God wants us to have. When Paul lists self-control as the fruit of the Spirit, he uses the Greek word eggratia. And that means literally an inward power to master our lives. How many people do you know that are followers of Jesus who have an inward power and are mastering their lives? I want to suggest to you, not many. I want to suggest to you, often we find people far from church who are mastering their lives far better than people who have been claiming to be followers of Jesus for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And we're still doing dumb things. We're still doing silliness. Instead of saying, inner boss, I want to master my life. And so it's important. Neuroscientists might call it self-control too. They also call it inhibitory control or impulse control. It's simply the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in the face of temptations and impulses, enabling us to achieve specific goals. Self-control happens in a part of our brains with a name that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to have to look at it, but I'm going to share it with you. You don't have to remember this. But this comes from, the ability to have self-control comes from the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Say that with me, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Now you can forget how to say it, but it's the section of your brain right about here. Touch your brain right here, just kind of the left temple where if you're putting your glasses up on your head, right about there. It's at the top left side of your brain, an inch or so back from the front. That's the part of the brain that helps me reach my goals by practicing self-control. It's the part of the brain that manages self-control. There's a very exciting thing about this inner boss part of our brains that isn't true of some of the other parts of our brain. This little section of our brain that's responsible for helping us reach goals is like a muscle. The more we exercise this self-control muscle, the stronger it gets. Now, it's tough to start with. You might have a difficult time to start with, but as you put it into practice, this is one of the rare parts of the brain that's like a muscle and gets stronger. The more I empower my inner boss to say things to me like 8 hours of sleep is good and you'll be healthy mentally and physically if you get it. Or my inner boss says to me, I'm only going to spend money based on what is in my long-term best interest, not on what makes me feel good emotionally right now. Or I will eat what is nutritionally right for my body 6 days a week, and on the seventh day, I will reward myself with foods that are just eaten for fun. Or I will love people every single day and help people as much as I can in every way I can without ever judging anybody. Those are things that had to start here, but as they start here and I put it into practice, it becomes a natural part of who I am. When I empower my inner boss to make rules that keep me moving toward good goals, the stronger that part of my brain gets and the better I get at achieving the things I've always dreamed of achieving. Adulting is ultimately about shifting myself from who I was as a passive child to actually becoming the active, responsible adult I was meant to be. Now, I'll let you in on a secret. Some days I still don't feel like adulting. But the more I empower my inner boss, the more I sense the fruit of the Spirit in me, the more I feel empowered to be the man I believe God has created me to be. I know some of you are going through difficult times. Let me say it like this. I love this church because I do believe it's one of the most diverse churches anywhere. I believe every Sunday, just the representation of the people that are here, it's one of the most beautiful things in the world. And I know some people are going through all different situations. There's some here who are killing it right now. I mean, things are popping for you. It's just happening, and it's so good, and I'm so happy for you. There are others who are feeling more influence in their lives than they've ever known before. It's just all good, and yet, I know sitting on the very same row, there are some people who are recovering from a life hit that has knocked you out. It took everything you could just to get here this morning. And yet we're all sitting in this place. Some people really struggling with adulting, really struggling with growing up. As my spiritual journey grows and evolves to be relevant in the culture I live in now, I'm really trying to think about how can I talk in a way that each person on each row would get something that they could apply right now that would help them become a better man or better woman right now. And so I hope you will engage in these talks and think about what we're talking about. I really believe if we sincerely invest time and energy into growing into the strongest, best version of ourselves, it'll be the best way for us to grow as a church. And we'll be able to see real growth happen. Now, in closing, I want to give you an assignment. This was so cool. Last week after church, a handful of us went to Jason's Deli. And when we were standing in line, we saw a couple that had been in the church service last Sunday. So Jane and I went over to talk to them just to say hello. And they said, we're talking about the sermon. And I said, really, what are y'all talking? I mean, what y'all are you saying? And they said, you mentioned coming up with rules that will govern our lives. And they said, we're being serious for the first time, thinking about what are the rules for us as a couple that's going to govern our lives. That made my whole week to know that a couple in their young 30s was thinking about what they had heard in the message and how they could apply it to their lives. Here's my assignment for all of us. I want you today to talk to a significant person in your life about the idea of an inner boss. I want you to think through a few things you know your inner boss is wanting you to change in your life to become your best self. And I want you to talk about it. Maybe it's a partner, friend, I don't know. I want you to talk about it to somebody. Then I want you, like I did with sleep and my telephone, to do the very same thing your inner boss is telling you to do. I want that boss, when you know the inner boss is saying, you need to stop that. Then I want you to listen to the inner boss and stop that. Or if you hear the inner boss saying, you need to start doing this, then in that active listening way, I want you to say, yes, sir, inner boss, and I want you to put it on the calendar and I want you to do it. And then as you begin to feel life in a healthier way because of the choices you're going to begin to make, I want you to let me know. I want you to write me. Write me. Tell me, hey, that inner boss thing, I put it into practice, and this is what's happened since. Because I want us to have story after story after story of people who take seriously their life. You know this is it, right? This is your one and only life. You're not going to come back as another person and get another shot at this. This is it. So adult, listen to the inner voice. Do what you need to do. Would you bow your head?